Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Giants. I am John Schmeelk. It's become a yearly tradition here on the Giants Huddle podcast. Sometime in either late July or early August, we get joined by Warren Sharp, who puts out his awesome NFL preview book every year. Warren, it's good to talk to you again, man. Tell everyone where they can find your book.
You can find the book on sharp.football or up at Amazon. It's a $30 PDF over at sharp.football. But for your listeners, use the code football. It gets $1, drops the price all the way down to $1 from $30. Or you can get it on Amazon for only about $36. I don't know how they're selling it for that cheap. We don't set the sale prices, but this is what it looks like on hard copy. If you're interested in, it's more than a coffee table book. Like this could be the coffee table if you just put some legs under it. It's a lot of information on all 32 teams, and obviously we're going to be excited to dive through the Giants chapter with you guys on the show today.
Yeah, it's very easy to go through, just to give you guys a feeling like it's multicolored. You got a lot of charts and graphs to kind of give you an easy idea of kind of how the Giants go through this. And you focused a big part of this chapter, Warren, on Russell Wilson. So we're going to talk about him. I always love talking about strength of schedule with you because you do a good job of breaking that down. More bad news for the Giants this year on that front. We'll hit that later on in the show. But I want to start with Russell Wilson here. And I think where we start is, some Giant fans were a little confused. Well, if you draft Jackson Dart, why do you want to bring in Russell Wilson? And the argument I always made is that Brian Daboll was desperate to raise the floor of the quarterback position. That he thinks if he is someone that can just be better, that his offense could look more like what a Brian Daboll offense is supposed to look like. And one thing you look at when you look at baseline performance for a quarterback is how they do on early downs when they're not pressured. And when it comes to that group of numbers, Russell Wilson actually looks pretty darn good.
Yeah, I think there's just a perception of Russell Wilson that he's a terrible quarterback. We all know what happened with him in Seattle and how that fell apart. And then he goes to Denver, and that never really seemed to get on track, let alone fell apart. Like that just seemed never to really work. There was a lot of dysfunction there. We talk a little bit about some of his stats from that time period. But certainly, in Pittsburgh, there was some highs at the start of the season and some lows at the end of the season. I think what a lot of people forget, and I'm big on context, as you know, John, is that we talked about the Pittsburgh Steelers last year at this exact time about how their schedule and the schedule makers set up their schedule so that it was a little bit easier at the beginning and then was going to be absolutely brutal late down the road, so that the Pittsburgh Steelers would be this borderline team, so that when they were on Christmas against the Kansas City Chiefs on prime TV, all the announcers could discuss is, will the Steelers actually have a winning record this year? Could it be Mike Tomlin's first losing record? All this type of narrative street. That's the back end of the Steelers schedule was the hardest that I had seen in recent memory. I want to say the last 8 weeks of their schedule was absolutely brutal. They played all of their divisional games at the end against good divisional teams. Plus, they played like some of the most difficult teams against the Kansas City Chiefs. And so
the Eagles were in there too, I think, for them too. I think they played the Eagles too.
The Eagles too. And so obviously Russell Wilson didn't look good. The rest of the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't look good. And so, yeah, Russell Wilson has his drawbacks and he has some issues, and we'll talk about them here over time about 3 wide receiver sets and all of these other types of things that are going to be different for New York. But the biggest issue that you mentioned is, if you take a step back and try to take off the glasses that you might have been wearing, your preconceived notions of what Russell Wilson is based upon these other offenses and what you've seen or heard around the league, and just look at the stats and just examine that on early downs when you're not being pressured. This is when you can remove those third downs, which tend to have high highs and low lows. You can remove those fourth quarters. You can just look at the times when a quarterback should be performing at a baseline level. Russell Wilson, out of 43 qualifying quarterbacks last year, ranked 8th in EPA per attempt. He ranked 14th in success rate. He ranked 16th in yards per attempt. So 43 qualifying quarterbacks. These are definitely above average numbers. And EPA per attempt, top 10. And the biggest thing to me was what I found was this boom bust ratio, where he was actually the best quarterback in the NFL. So let's talk about what that is for a second. A boom play is a pass attempt where you deliver at least one expected point added or more. So it's a big play that makes a big impact, whether it's a chunk gain, whether it's a nice touchdown pass, some sort of a play that's going to achieve more than one expected point. A bust is the exact opposite. You're losing at least one expected point. It's a sack that you take on third down. It's an interception that you throw. It's so a big negative play. And Russell Wilson ranked number one for the most boom plays with the least bust plays in the NFL. He averaged 19 boom plays to every one bust play last season for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is obviously phenomenal and was the best in the NFL. So not only is Russell Wilson, even last year, been a more than serviceable quarterback, and I'm not going to try to sit here and lobby and say I think he is a top 10 quarterback in 2025. He produced in a top 10 statistical category for certain statistics, but I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback. But he is dramatically better than what Justin Fields was doing with that very same offense. And he's also been dramatically better than anything that Brian Daboll has had to work with from his time in the New York Giants offense. And you could argue, well, that first year with Daniel Jones, this, that, they went to the playoffs, they won a playoff game. They were massaging things with Daniel Jones to try to limit his negatives and to do the things that he did well, which is a lot of running with the football and hands-offs in the red zone and things of that nature to just try to increase the upside there. So this is, as you mentioned, going to be the best quarterback situation that Brian Daboll has had to work with entering a season since he's been in New York, in my opinion.
And just to give you an idea, over the last 2 years, you have this number in there too. The Giants quarterbacks over the last 2 years, when clean on early down, so those same numbers where you had Wilson 8th in EPA and then, top 15 in the other two categories. Giants quarterbacks were 25th in completion rate, 29th in yards per attempt, 30th in boom rate, 28th in EPA per attempt. So a big increase from what they had here the last couple of years. And you talk about the boom versus bust thing, and I think when you talk about raising the floor, it's one, avoiding turnovers, and we'll get to the pressure and the sack in a little bit. But he avoids turnovers, to your point, the bust rate's low. But it's the ability to get the ball down the field. And Brian Daboll has been begging his quarterbacks to get the ball down the field for a couple of years. And Russell Wilson throws a great deep ball. And I know you always bring the numbers, Warren, in terms of how explosive plays on offense can help teams score and how important they are to a successful offense. And that's something that Russell Wilson has been consistently good at his entire career.
Yeah, deep passing, effective passing outside the numbers, trying to generate some of those explosive plays. We saw that, Chris Collinsworth used to say on this NBC shows the moon ball from Russ down the field. Here's the thing. Explosive plays are, turnovers, win-lose games. Explosive plays, gaining those, get you points on the scoreboard, especially in modern NFL football where defenses are set up more to prevent these types of plays. It's harder to gain them. What you need to do more frequently is to convert slowly and move the ball and matriculate it down the field. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's converting on third downs, things of that nature. If you have an offense, though, that can generate those explosive plays, that is like an easy button that you can hit to get points on your scoreboard quickly. If you look over the last 5 years, if you have 0 explosive plays on a drive, 0, and by that I'm saying 15 yards or more. So just a 15-yard play. If you don't have a single 15-yard play on a drive, you're going to score points on that drive only 15% of the time. You're going to score a touchdown on that drive only 6% of the time. And you're going to average 0.7 points per drive. So you're hardly ever going to score points. You're going to average less than 1 point per drive if you don't have a single play of at least 15 yards. If you have exactly one play of 15 yards, exactly one, you move your score rate from 15% of your drives to score all the way up to 60% of your drives are going to score points. You move your touchdown rate from a 6% of your drives are going to score a touchdown with 0 explosive plays to 34% of your drives are going to score a touchdown. That's a ridiculous improvement. And your points per drive are going to go from less than 1 at 0.7 all the way up to 3.1 over a field goal. On average, your drives are going to score over 3 points when you have even one explosive play. And then obviously those percentages increase and the points per drive increase if you might have 2 explosive plays, etc. But the point remains that offensively, your goal is to bypass third downs. and if you do get forced into third down, make it a manageable third down. But when you're bypassing third downs, you have to pick and choose the times that you are going to go for an explosive play. Because if you go for an explosive shot play on, 2nd and 8, well, guess what? If that's not complete, you're in a 3rd and 8. So you can't frequently be going for explosives on 1st or 2nd down. You have to figure out when you're going to look to sprinkle those in. But an offense that is incapable of generating those, or a quarterback who's not accurate down the field, or who can't produce nearly as frequently on those types of plays, you're in the bucket of teams that are only going to score touchdowns on 6% of their drives, and that are going to average less than a point per drive. And so Russell Wilson gives you the ability to shift into the place that you want to live, which is at least one explosive play, averaging over 3 points per drive, averaging a touchdown on 34% of your drives. So he's going to bring an element to this offense that they haven't seen in recent years.
And when he throws deep, you have these numbers again in your book. Last year, number 1 on EPA per attempt on passes, 15 plus yards down the field, 0.79, 10 success rate, 3rd in yards per attempt. And over the last 2 years, 4th in deep ball accuracy, 4th in EPA per attempt, 14th in completion rate. He's a really good deep thrower. And I think the interesting thing, you mentioned getting into these third downs, which can be a little more volatile, right, from year to year. He's a guy on third down. He's just going to chuck it, man. He had one of the highest deep ball rates on third downs in the entire league last year.
Yeah, he did. And you mentioned that stat, and I'm glad you did. The 3rd in accuracy when throwing 15 plus yards down the field, because that removes some of the aspects of, do you have receivers on your team who can catch the ball, like in Denver or like in Pittsburgh, right? George Pickens, we know. But aside from that, they didn't really have very good receivers at getting open down the field. And they had a lot of issues with George Pickens last year in terms of him just putting the effort in and him being on the same page, that sort of thing. So, the fact that you've got a young receiver in a Malik Neighbors, and you got a couple other guys who can also get down the field and stretch the field. You got a quarterback who is the 3rd most accurate getting the ball down there. Like I said, that opens things up. And yes, Russell Wilson, he unfortunately will hold the ball. He's a boom bust type quarterback on third down. And that's why if you look at his third down stats, they're not going to look nearly as good. But when you separate out early downs and clean pockets, that's when he really does shine. On third downs, that's what Daboll's going to really have to work to do, is try to avoid those situations, because Russ will go for that big play. And if he doesn't get that big play, he's going to take a sack. I mean, because he's holding on to the football too long to try to get that big play on a 3rd and long. So it could be coaching, maybe Daboll's able to coach that out of him a little bit, but that's certainly been something that Russell Wilson has done in the last several years.
Huddle up, get in here. If you're lined up here, you got to go over the middle with it to score.
Right. How do we make that happen?
I don't know.
But Citizens does.
Make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of Eli Manning.
All right, and I think that's a great transition, Warren. So let's talk about some of the things the Giants might have to work around with Russell Wilson as their quarterback. You look at his sack rate over the past 3 or 4 years, it's top 3 in the NFL. He takes sacks. That's what he does. And if you look at his passing numbers, sacks aside, under pressure, his numbers are widely divergent. That is for most quarterbacks, but I think more so for him. Under pressure versus not under pressure. So what do you see when you look at Wilson, his tendencies to take sacks, how much those can kill drives, and then how he performs under pressure?
Yeah, the issue that we have here is the New York Giants and your offensive line and the pressure that they allow. And it's one of the highest pressure rates that they allow for any team. And Russell Wilson, this is his kryptonite. This new Superman movie is out right now, and I haven't watched it yet, but I don't know if they incorporate kryptonite into that movie. But certainly this is the issue for Russell Wilson is pressure, because he is looking for those big plays. He wants to make a difference for his team. He also does not, to me, from watching him closely with the Steelers last year, he doesn't process things quite as quickly as he once did, but he still believes so much in himself and his own ability that he thinks he's faster than what he is, and he thinks he's more mobile in the pocket than what he was. And so it causes a lot of problems because he thinks he can keep buying time and hold on to it to make a big play happen. He's got so much inner confidence, but then he struggles actually to escape the pressure or to feel where the pressure is coming from. And he's taking too long waiting on something down the field and ends up causing negative plays. So when he's under pressure, you kind of threw out some of the big picture numbers, but he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. And that's going to be the biggest challenge for the New York Giants, is trying to figure out a way to play the game in such a way, complementary football on both sides, so that you are not in these holes where it's obvious what Russell Wilson is going to be doing. And that means your defense has to play well, A. B, I don't know if we'll talk about now or later, but you guys struggle to score points in the first quarter of games.
Get into it. Go ahead.
It's the most mind-boggling thing to me. And I know your team and with your quarterbacks and you struggle with skill and talent and all of that sort of thing. But it's impossible for me to imagine a team that ranks 32, 32, and 30 in first quarter points in each of the last 3 years. Like, how do you consistently rank so horribly scoring points to start games? And if you do that, I don't care who the quarterback is, it's going to make their lives more difficult. With crappy quarterbacks, it's going to make their lives even more difficult. With Patrick Mahomes, it's not going to make his life easy, but he can navigate around it. Russell Wilson, it's going to be a problem, even though he's not in the bucket of your Tommy DeVitos and Drew Lock, etc. He's still the type of quarterback when, if defenses know he's passing the football and he's in an obvious pass situation and they're able to figure out their pressure packages for him on third downs or second half of games when they know he's going to be passing the football, that is a recipe for disaster. That is not something that the Pittsburgh Steelers had success with Russ last year. It's not going to be something that the Giants have success with this year. And if you just look at the Giants the last 3 years, and I know this is a little bit more of an elementary statistic, but if they're winning at halftime, they're 11-3 in games. If they're losing at halftime, they're 5-28 in games. So, I mean, it's you couldn't get more divergent than those two sets of statistics based upon, are you up at halftime? Maybe even it's a point or 3 points. But the bottom line is you have to figure out a way to start games faster so that Russell Wilson isn't put in these situations. So my opinion, you got to start games faster. You got to start series faster on first and second down, so you're not forcing yourself into those third down situations. You need your defense to help on that side of the football to keep the opponent from scoring a lot of points early in games to fall behind. It's all going to work together, but it's vital. And it might seem odd to suggest that it's more important for Russell Wilson to get started faster in games than some of those other quarterbacks. But for some of those other quarterbacks, it didn't really matter. With Russ, you actually have a chance, you have a hope, you have an opportunity to win some of these games, in my opinion, this year, because he is better. You got to get him started off in these games faster. So whatever Brian Daboll needs to do to come out and script plays better, script plays more aggressively, try to make decisions more aggressively. You can't continue to fall behind, and you can't continue to be a bottom 3 team in scoring offense year after year after year, because one year you could blame Daniel Jones, and the next year you could blame Daniel Jones got injured and it's all these other guys. But like, you can't continue allowing this to happen. At some point, it's the system, it's the offense, it's the coaching. We've got to improve our aggression and our play calling in the first quarter of games.
Yeah, and look, that also allows your pass rush to get going if you're playing with a lead, right? So I think that's going to help the defense. Yep. And I can tell you, Warren, they know this. I know one of the things Brian Daboll has stressed to his teams, every year a coach has like a few bullet points where these are the keys for us to winning games this year. I can tell you one of those bullet points has been win the first half. So they know that they need to do better earlier in games for sure. We talked about him under pressure. One of the things that have really dragged down Russell Wilson's EPA over the last 3 years, and for fans that don't know, that's expected points added per play, has been the sacks he's taken, right? If you just look at his quarterback rating, it's been pretty consistently good. When he throws passes, he's a good player. He just gets sacked a lot. How much, I know we talk a lot about, losing the turnover battle, how that helps you lose games, but I think people sometimes underrate how much, the same way an explosive play will help a drive, a sack will kill a drive. Can you kind of go into how much sacks can just in one play destroy your chance of scoring points on a drive?
Yeah, it's amazing. We do. I refer to them as drive killers. I know other people do as well, because the down counts and you lost yardage. And sometimes you might lose the football, obviously, if it's a sack fumble. But let's just talk about the situations where we're not going into EPA of expected points lost on a sack. Let's just talk about the percentage of times that you're going to score. Over the last 5 years, league-wide average, if you take 0 sacks on a drive, you are going to score points on 41% of your drives. And 26% of their drives, you will score a touchdown. If you take at least 1 sack on a drive, a 41% score rate drops to 23%. A 26% touchdown rate drops all the way down to 8%. Whew. Now, Russell Wilson specifically, over the same time frame, obviously he's been in Seattle, then he went to Denver, then he went to Pittsburgh. 0 sacks on a drive. He's league average in score rate. 41% of the drives he leads score points. That drops down to 22% if he takes at least 1 sack, which is a little bit worse than league average. And his touchdown rate drops from 22% without a sack, which is lower than league average. League average is 26%. Russ is at 22% on his offenses. And then that will drop to 8% if he does end up taking a sack, which is league average. So, and Brian Daboll's offenses have struggled mightily. If you look at his offenses since he's been there for the last 3 years, if they take at least 1 sack, only 19% of his offense's drives score points, which is below league average of 23%. And only 5% will score a touchdown, which is below the league average of 8%. Now, their ceiling is obviously also lower when they don't take a sack. They're at 34% score rate. When they don't take a sack, league average was at 41%. So they're below the league average across the board, but they are similarly massively impacted on drives where they do end up taking a sack. And so whether it's the Giants offense, whether it's Russell Wilson himself, or whether it's every single quarterback in the NFL, sacks are drive killers. You have to avoid taking sacks as much as possible. Any type of incompletion that's not intercepted is going to be vastly superior to taking a sack. It almost does not matter what type of incompletion it is. So understanding the pressure, understanding pre-snap what the defense is showing in your film study, understanding what they might be doing off of this, because a lot of teams make adjustments very late. They try to come in with things like I liken it to, John, the NFL offenses for years had the upper hand with pre-snap motion and then play action. It was things that were occurring right as the snap was happening to confuse the defense, to get them thinking about something else, and to give the offense an upper hand. Well, defenses have started to do their same type of pre-snap motion, play action edges, which is very late shifts into different coverages, into sending different blitzers, and all of those, disguised blitzes, or they'll drop out. All those types of things definitely cause problems for the quarterback. So the quarterback, in Russell Wilson's case, he needs to understand, what does this defense quarter typically do? What does he like to do in this specific instance? So that Russ kind of has an understanding. It might not be what he's seeing right now. 5 seconds left on the play clock, 4 seconds left on the play clock, 3 seconds left on the play clock. What might they switch off of this? And then in addition, where are my weak links? Can I adjust anything with my protection? Do I need to adjust anything with the play called the audible? Where are my weak links on the offensive line if I'm not adjusting anything? And then where do I need to go with the football? And all of these things have to be happening. The processing speed in the quarterback's mind in 2025 has to happen so much faster than anything that happened in prior years. But the biggest thing is, where's that pressure coming from? Where are my weak links so that I know what I need to do with the football? And in an ideal world, right, John, you have answers to everything before the snap. The defense is showing this look. They've tended to shift to this. I'm going to audible to this play. Then I see them make that last shift. My offensive line is going to make the blitz pick up appropriately, and I'm in a good play, and boom, we're going to have a successful play here. That's a perfect world. That does not happen very frequently, though, in the NFL. And so understanding that pressure might come on 40% of your dropbacks, and that the Giants offensive line allows a lot of pressure, how are we going to make sure that we get rid of the ball so that we're not pressured, let alone sacked? That's the issue.
Absolutely. Giants Huddle podcast brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day celebrations to your everyday financial needs, Big Blue fans can get the most out of every moment with Citizens. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. All right, two more things in terms of Russell fitting into the Giants offense here, Warren. You had two other really interesting nuggets in here. One was about his preference for 11 personnel and how much better he's played with 3 wide receivers on the field versus 12 personnel with a couple of tight ends or 21 with a couple of running backs. And how do you see that now converting to what the Giants want to do with Brian Daboll, where they like to have 3 wide receivers on the field?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's going to be really fun and interesting and a real big juxtaposition to what Russ has been dealing with in his last 2 stops. Think back to what he was doing in Denver in 2023, in Pittsburgh in 2024. The Denver Broncos with Sean Payton used 11 personnel on 52% of their snaps. That was 25th most 11 personnel. The Pittsburgh Steelers were even less than that at 46%. That ranked 26th in the NFL last year. So the past 2 years, 25th and 26th in terms of usage of 11 personnel. Brian Daboll's New York Giants are up at 69% last year. That was number 5 in the NFL in frequency of 11 personnel. And if you look at Russ's splits in 2023 and in 2024, the last 2 years, when he was throwing out of 11 personnel, which was still right around 50%, right? We're talking about 46%, 52%. So there's a good sample size. 50% of the time, he's still throwing out 11 personnel. He ranked number 4 in EPA per attempt, number 9 in success, number 10 in yards per attempt, number 1 in touchdown rate. He was great. But when he threw with heavier personnel, 2 or fewer wide receivers, whether it was 2 tight ends out on the field, a fullback out on the field, whatever this exact personnel grouping was, 12, 21, 13, etc. 41st out of 43 qualifying quarterbacks, 41st in EPA, 41st in success, 37th in yards per attempt. So all of that heavier personnel that's designed to trick the defense that, hey, it might be an actual run and now we're going to pass off of that, was not working very well for Russell Wilson. When they put in 11 personnel and it was more likely to be a clear and obvious, Russ could see the defense and make those adjustments. And if he maybe identify pressure a little bit better because the defense was spread, he was one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL over the last 2 years. So that brings me to feel really strongly that this could be an actual better pairing for Russ than Pittsburgh, then Denver. And we saw highs and lows, and mostly lows in Denver and some highs in Pittsburgh. But I think we've got much more upside here with this offense for Russ and the way he fits with Brian Daboll, which I didn't know entering my process of writing this book. I wasn't as versed in what Russ was struggling with when he was in Pittsburgh last year, for example. When we're looking at those games, it's just like, okay, they use heavier personnel 52% of the time, 11 personnel 48% of the time, but I wasn't running those splits to get a better understanding as to how much better he was out of 11 personnel. But now that I've had the time this offseason to dig into it, it just gives me a lot more optimism for this upcoming season.
All right, second part of it is throwing over the middle. It's something that Russell Wilson has never been great at in terms of frequency, especially in an intermediate area of the field. He's been more of a perimeter thrower. A lot of his stuff over the middle, and you detail this in your book, is dump off stuff short, right? Like right near the line of scrimmage. How do you think that's going to mold together with the way Brian Daboll likes to utilize the middle of the field?
Yeah, the good part is I think 80% of the passes between the numbers for the Giants were 10 yards or fewer, which was 4th of 32 teams. 53% traveled 5+ yards, which was lower. So Brian Daboll doesn't really work deep down the middle of the field very frequently, and that's not something that Russell Wilson has excelled in. So I do think that there could be a decent pairing. They're not going to ask him to do something that he's not as comfortable doing. The Giants do throw an above average 47% attempts between the numbers, which is more than what Russell Wilson has been asked to do in the past. In Pittsburgh and in Denver, he was only throwing the ball 37% of the time between the numbers, which was 42 out of 46 qualifying quarterbacks. So the Giants are going to throw there more, but they are throwing there shorter, which is where Russ is a little bit better. But that is going to be something that's interesting. We'll have to see how he ends up doing here, because he has not been wanting to throw the ball over the middle. And that was always one of the issues like that led to his time to leave Seattle. Everybody was talking about, he's not throwing the ball over the middle of the field. What is he doing? And then in Denver, the same type of thing. It was a little bit more clear where he's going to be throwing the ball, a little bit more predictable. And so, Brian Daboll will ask him to be throwing the football over the middle of the field. The interesting thing will be Russ being the veteran, Daboll being a great offensive mind. Will Russ be able to tell him, look, Dabes, I don't really want to do this. I want to do something else. And will Dabes be like, we need to be doing this more in my offense. You're going to have to throw the ball more where you don't necessarily like to. And then how's that going to end up working? What will those results be? So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch early on in the 2025 season, is just how frequently is Russ throwing the ball over the middle of the field and what are those results?
If you want to know how to manage 2 minutes of crunch time football, I'm your man. But if you're wondering about a long-term financial plan, you should talk to Citizens. Hey, I can also talk lawn care.
I'd like to learn about a mowing routine.
Yes, I knew I could help.
Make sense of your money with Citizens.
I know the other key you put out there too, the Giants' red zone efficiency on offense the last 2 years, Warren, has just been abysmal. It has not been good. And if this offense wants to score more points, which they're going to have to if they're going to want to win more games, that's something that also has to get better, correct?
They ranked 32 in red zone efficiency last year after ranking 31 in red zone efficiency in 2023. So they got to start faster and they got to convert when they're down there. If they take the time to get the ball down into the red zone, which is not something your offense has been particularly good at over the last several years, it has to count. You've got to figure out the best plays to call versus that defense so that you're going to have efficiency down inside of the red zone. Because like explosive plays, red zone drives that end with 3 points or a turnover on downs versus a touchdown can swing games. That performance inside of the red zone absolutely can swing games. And so it's something that from a play calling perspective to an execution perspective just simply has to improve. And there's no reason it can't with Russell Wilson there in 2025, but it needs to be an emphasis. Like you said, those faster starts are an emphasis inside the building. Same has to be the case for what they do inside of the red zone.
And now I don't think Giant fans want to hear this because they've been patient enough, Warren, but I feel like we should warn the Giant fans that at the start of this year, they're probably going to have to be a little patient with the offense, mostly because of the schedule the Giants have in terms of opposing pass defenses they're going up against. You detail this in your book. Overall, the Giants have the second hardest schedule for an offense over the course of the year, third hardest for basically most of your passing metrics as well. But it's especially tough at the beginning of the year. Why don't you break it down for Giants fans?
It's not fair, really, that the Giants, a team with a record as bad as they were, who came within a whisker of landing the number one overall pick, are forced to play a schedule that's the number one most difficult in the NFL based upon opponent win totals. That's number two in the NFL based upon opponent efficiency, and is absolutely brutal for opposing quarterbacks. I mean, what Russell Wilson is going to have to deal with this year is the third most difficult schedule of opposing pass defenses start to finish. But the first 8 weeks of the season, think about this, Giants fans, first 8 weeks of the season, Russell Wilson is going to be facing 5 defenses last year that ranked top 7 against the pass: the Broncos, the Eagles, the Chargers, the Commanders, and the Chiefs. They're playing all of them. They play the Eagles twice, week 6 and week 8. It is by far the number one toughest schedule of pass defenses for any team to start the year, which is obviously why I don't think it's wise to even think about trying to incorporate Jackson Dart into the offense at any time early on in the season. But it's also why it theoretically could be a little bit discouraging. I've given a lot of things to be optimistic about, which I like doing. I'd rather talk optimism with fan bases than pessimism, but I'm always going to be truthful with them. But this does throw a bucket of cold water on the fact that like this offense could start out quick. This offense could look good, or the addition of Russell Wilson is going to be, because he's Daboll's most talented quarterback, is going to make a night and day difference. And he's going to be able to throw the ball deeper down the field and have more efficiency there and look better in 11 personnel. All these great things that are likely to happen overall might not look pretty at the first 7 weeks of the season because of this schedule of the first 8 weeks. it's just going to be something that the Giants are going to have to be patient with and work through. And I know fans are not going to like to hear that. And I know fans are going to surely express their feelings from the stands if Russell Wilson is coming in there and looking poorly because of their preconceptions with Russell Wilson from years past. And if he performs poorly against the Broncos in week 7 or, the Eagles in a couple of games, like it's not going to be great, but it's a tough schedule. I don't know what else to tell you. It's the team that almost picked first should not have to play a schedule that's this difficult, but that's just the luck of the draw. The NFL does not assign schedules. These schedules are given based upon where you finished last year and based upon a secular nature of how they rotate things around. And this is what the Giants have to deal with this year in 2025.
I just can't believe you would intimate that fans in the New York, New Jersey area are not patient and understanding, Warren. I just don't understand where you could have gotten that
It's what you guys are known for.
Anything else about the strength of schedule and just the teams they're playing, either from the Giants' perspective on defense, jump out as you're heading into the year that you think fans should kind of be aware of?
No, I just it's crazy to me. This offensive line, the team has spent a lot of money and resources into this offensive line. It's one of the most expensive in the NFL, yet the production has been one of the worst in the NFL. And some of that has to do with the quarterback. And the results in the 2025 season are really going to come down to how well Daboll can coach the team through this and navigate the waters. There's a lot of pressure on his shoulders this year, in my opinion. Obviously, they're going out after this quarterback, and if his offense still looks bad with a quarterback like Russell Wilson, that's not going to bode very well. But he has to also figure out when to incorporate the future into this thing as it relates to Jackson Dart and how to manage expectations for the fans and the media to know when this guy is going to potentially be introduced and then how that looks when he does get introduced. There's a lot on Daboll's plate here in a year. He's already sort of on the hot seat. So it's going to be a big challenge in 2025. The results might not always look pretty, but I do feel more optimistic about the Giants this year than I did the Giants last year entering the start of the season. I just wish the schedule was a little bit easier because that definitely plays a role. You guys are favored in just 1 out of 17 games this season. Your win total, and you're supposed to finish last in the NFC East. So as the East gets stronger, you guys are you're a better team this year, certainly, and maybe there's some ways around it. If the path to success, John, is defense that I think is really good, continuing to improve. It's a quarterback that's better than what you've had before, playing to his strengths and trying to hide his weaknesses, which we've seen Daboll do really well in the past. And it's figuring out a way to start games faster and convert in the red zone. And if you do all of those things, you will exceed expectations. The issue is it's not going to it still might not produce a winning season, but you guys will exceed the expectations that have been set forth upon you based upon like the betting markets, for example, or just what the general intelligent, savvy analyst thinks that the Giants are going to do in 2025. You'll do better than that.
It's funny. I said on one of our shows the other day where this team could play much better. The record might not look much difference, but fans should really enjoy the much better point differential. I know that doesn't generally get people excited, but like you can get through these first 4 weeks of the year where they have the Commanders, Cowboys, Chargers, and Chiefs, be 0-4, play 4 close games, actually be impressed with the way the team has played, but you're looking at an 0-4 record. It's really, really tough.
Yeah, it's all about just showing growth and showing improvement. And like you said, if you can come out here and actually put up some points in these games and look a little bit better and look more buttoned up and constructed, and if it's not every single time the offense coming to the sideline and failure and people being discouraged with one another and heads down or yelling, and if things look a little bit more buttoned up because the offense is having more success, I do think that that's going to be a balm that kind of helps cure some of the ails of the team actually losing some games. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm reserved in my judgment. I think that you guys are going to be in for a very difficult 2025. But I think you have the tools here to look a little bit better. And I just want Russ to, I want all my research to pay off, John. I want Russ to actually look like I think that he is capable of looking, because I have like that 5% opinion of Russ. 95% of the people are selling him. They don't think he's good anymore. They don't think and I am looking and finding aspects where I still think he's a quality quarterback who can perform. And I just want to see enough of that this season. And then I'll feel a little bit better about my analysis of you guys over the last several months.
Let's close with this, because you mentioned it very briefly at the top of your last answer, that you think the Giants defense is going to be really good. So do I. They got really good pass rushers. They had a couple of veterans in the secondary. I know a lot of your analysis and breakdown in the chapters about the Giants offense, but if the offense can, keep games close, maybe get a couple leads here or there, what do you think this defense is capable of doing?
I mean, we've got you guys ranked as the 4th best front 7 in the NFL from a pure talent perspective. You guys last year played the 6th toughest schedule of opposing offenses. Now we've got you playing the 16th toughest schedule of opposing offenses. So you're going to play teams that are a little bit weaker offensively, theoretically, on paper, as we enter the season. That's all we can look at right now. And we think from a talent perspective, your defense is better, especially in that front 7. So make an impact on the game. I mean, that defensive line can absolutely get after opposing quarterbacks, but what will be a problem is if you are falling behind and then that opposing offense just has the ability to run the ball out, doesn't have to sit there and drop back and pass. And wouldn't it be nice to play in that position of strength where the opposing team is the one in the second half that has to pass the ball, and then your defensive line and your front 7 can figure out creative ways to get after them and wreak havoc on that opposing quarterback, as opposed to that shoe being always on the other foot and it always happening to you guys. That's when we really see the strengths of this defense come out, and when it'll be fun to watch this defense perform is with a lead in the second half. So the defense has to play their guts out for all 60 minutes. Hopefully the offense can really front load some of their best stuff so that you guys can then have a little bit more fun in the second half of some of these games. But I absolutely believe that your defense is that side of the ball can keep you guys in games and keep things competitive in 2025.
All right, Warren, one more time. Tell the folks that they can find you on social media, your website, the book, and anything else you want them to know about.
You just head over to sharp.football. If you want the PDF, it's just $1, and you use the code football. It'll drop the price from $30 down to $1. You can also find it up at Amazon.com, but it's the fastest way to get ready for the 2025 season. It's a perfect time to start digging in as training camps are opening them up here. So thanks for having me as always, John. It's a pleasure to talk Giants with you and the state of the NFL, and looking forward to it already next year.
Yeah, I can't wait. We're recording this. It's going to air a little bit later, but we're 50 days from kickoff, and I can't wait. The football season's coming fast and furious. Warren, always great getting your insights and your takes. Appreciate the time, and we'll talk soon, all right?
Thanks for having me.
Warren Sharp and the Giants Huddle podcast brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. We'll see you next time, everybody.